Welcome, folks, to Financial Planning with your host, Jack Taboda, your IRA 401k rollover specialist. So glad that you're tuned in today. We're so thankful for the listeners that have listened to us. Going on 2 years now to where you've woke up every morning, you're drinking your coffee, and you tuned in and looked for Jack Taboda and his professional expertise. 35 years in the business. He knows what he's talking about. And, of course, not only has he got the 35 years, but he cares. I mean, when you sit down, you look at him, you look in his eye, you'll know that this is a guy that cares about his clients. He cares about the 500-some clients that he's currently serving, and the fact that he takes it to heart that it is your money, it's your retirement, it's your dream. You've worked for this your entire life, and he doesn't take that lightly. So he does look forward to meeting with you. Thank you for those that are listening. Thank you for those that are thinking, hey, you know, the summer's winding down, and I really need to get in there and meet with Jack. Many of you have called in. We're going to meet, but then this thing and that thing, and you procrastinated, and you know you're living that, you know, that set it and forget it mentality. And you know, for those that did that with 8-track tape players, or, you know, things change. They change all the time, and it's so important. And nowadays, as Jack has said, it's changing so quick. I mean, the whole world thing, everything's going so quick. More and more, there's a need for a financial expert to be looking out for your money. And speaking of financial experts, we're so glad that once again we have Tim Newell, the managing director and lead portfolio manager from Harvest Investment Services, in studio. And of course, today Jack is not able to make it. I'm pretty sure he'll be back next week. Just been swamped. He trusts me, Larry Chappell, his co-host. He trusts the guests that we have on air to help out with the show during this busy time. And Tim is going to introduce his special guest, Mike McClelland, the Director of Retirement Plans, and we're continuing to talk about 401ks, such a big part of what you're doing in your financial portfolio. Tim, give us a little recap of what we did last week on the show, and we're so glad that you would come back and be with us. Tell us.
Larry, thanks again for having us on the show this week. We've thoroughly enjoyed our relationship with Taboda & Associates. Jack Taboda is the affiliate advisor of Harvest Investment Services. Mm-hmm. Jack and I have been friends for many, many, many years. We go back about the same length of time in the business. I started back in 1981, and wow. Jack beats me by a year or two. But wow. But I don't want to get too deep into that because it makes me feel old. So, but it's been a great run. We love working with folks and serving people in this business. And Larry, I love what you and Jack do here on the radio. You provide meaningful financial education to folks. And reality is people go through life often recognizing that the education that they received, whether it was in high school or college, woefully prepared them to be able to deal with some of the financial decisions and the choices that they would have to make. Having nothing to do with if that's what they did for a living. But money is related to things that we do every day. And most people are not adequately prepared with the financial education that they've received. And the classes that they might have taken did a very poor job at best of really preparing them to be able to make good financial choices throughout their lifetime. And so, Larry, I really do appreciate what you and Jack do on a regular basis here on the air, and what you do working with folks when they come in to visit you there and at your various different office locations. Larry, once again, we're thrilled to be working with Taboda & Associates in the investment space. Specifically today, we're talking about 401k plans. And whether you're a employee and you have a 401k or some other form of a retirement plan at work that you're often scratching your head trying to figure out what do I do with all these choices, and you feel a little overwhelmed, or even, let me say more importantly today, if you're an employer. And many of you that are listening are employers, whether you're an employer and you have 1 or 2 employees, or you're an employer and you have hundreds of employees, or you're in a position with your employer as a decision maker. Maybe you're the head of HR, you work in HR, or you're on an investment committee for the 401k plan. We're going to go over some content today that's going to help you as an employer know how to make some valuable questions that you're really going to have to ask yourself. And we're not going to really provide all the answers for you here today. That would be impossible to do over the radio. But we want to give you some important questions that you really need to be asking yourself as an employer. But to back up, we're also going to take some time to unpack a little bit more of the 401k Active Watch strategy. And so whether you're an employee and you have a retirement plan, or you're already retired and you have a 401k plan, or that you need to get rolled over to your IRA, or whatever position you're in, if you have money that you have saved and it's earmarked for retirement, I want you to sit back and listen up, because I think we're going to provide some valuable content today that's going to really help you in making some good choices going forward. Last week we talked about the 401k and the retirement plan assets for the average American household typically represent one of the largest slices of the pie, of that investment pie that you have in your household. And yet it's often the slice that is filled with the greatest amount of discomfort, not knowing exactly what do you do, what's the right choice to make. Often there's so many investment choices that you as an employee have within your plan. All the different mutual fund choices you have available, these new things called target date funds. Maybe you have a managed money option there, but you have all these choices, and often it leads to a lot of confusion. And often by default, what many folks do with not just their retirement plan assets, but many of their assets, they by default end up using something called buy and hold, or kind of set it and forget it. And what we're talking about today is something radically different than that. In other words, my guess is, if you're listening, there's been times when the markets were going down and you're scratching your head saying, there's got to be a better way. Should I really be move into a different account? What should I be doing? With the markets going down the way that they're going down this week, this month, this year, are there some changes that I should be making? And often, you're just so confused that often when people are confused, Larry, what do? Nothing.
Nothing,
right?
Yeah, right.
And it ends up staying in the same place that it's been in for the last 6 months or maybe even 6 years. And often that's not the right choice. No, I'm not suggesting that people should go out and change just for the sake of change. There has to be rhyme and reason to it. But what 401k Active Watch does is it provides you as an employee advice on how to be able to better manage your 401k plan. If you're an employer, it's a way to be able to help you as an employer deal with your fiduciary risk. See, we are at Harvest Investment Services and at Teboda & Associates, we are fiduciaries, which means that we are always acting in the best interest and on behalf of our investment clients. Well, if you're an employer, you're also a fiduciary on behalf of those employees that work for you with that retirement plan. Now, what does that really mean? Now, I'm going to ask you employees to plug your ears a second. Don't listen to this because the employers are going to get mad when I say this. But you as an employer are personally liable for the investment decisions and choices that you're making on behalf of that plan, on behalf of your employees. Your personal assets are personally at risk. And I want to be careful how I go about unpacking that on the air here, but hopefully I've startled you enough as an employer where you're listening up and saying, I probably need to listen to this and pay attention because I don't want to end up losing money by making the wrong choices.
Folks, you're listening to Financial Planning with your host, Jack Teboda, your IRA 401k rollover specialist. We're up against a hard break. Special guest today, Tim Newell. We'll be right back.
Right. You got to know when to hold up, know when to fold up, know when to walk away, know when to run.
Folks, welcome back to Financial Planning with your host, Jack Taboda, your IRA 401k rollover specialist. You call in every week, you ask me how to spell the website. TEBODA.com. Now, you can still call me. Feel free to call. TEBODA.com. Tons of information on there. You'll find our past radio programs. You'll find all kinds of information on there. You'll find the 401k watch tab on there. You'll be able to, at least see a video of Jack and see how good looking he is. And feel free to check that. Today, Jack is not in the studio. I am Larry Chappell, the co-host of Financial Planning. We have his very good dear friend Tim Newell in, and Tim is the managing director and lead portfolio manager of Harvest Investment Services. We're talking about a lot of things here. Go ahead, Tim. Tell us where we're at.
Well, in the last segment, Larry, we were talking about 401k Active Watch. And I was just beginning to explain what 401k Active Watch is. And I know last week we did a whole segment on 401k Active Watch, but let me do a brief overview and a 30,000-foot run over the top of that for you guys. The 401k Active Watch is really a way to help folks do a better job of making investment decisions within their 401k and retirement plans. But more importantly, it's a way to be able to help folks know when to be in and when to be out. As your tag song says, know when to hold 'em and know when to fold 'em. And so how do you know when to do that? Well, folks, that's one of the things that we do. We help you to know when to do that. In a nutshell, if you go back and you look at the last 14 years in the equity markets, if you look at the S&P 500, Larry, there's been two times. The first time was from 2000 to 2003. We saw a market decline of greater than 50%.
Wow.
And then the most recent one was from the fall of 2007 to the spring of 2009. Markets went down over 56%.
Wow.
Those two declines represented some real pain for the listeners out there today. And, our objective is to help you make sure that the next time we do have a market decline, and I'm not trying to predict anything, I'm not trying to predict when markets will decline again, but I can tell you for sure that eventually markets will decline again. By how much and when, I have no idea. But the objective is really to have a plan, to have a strategy that relieves a lot of that pain that you experienced the last time that we had one of those major market declines. And so whether the next major market decline is a 10% decline or a 50% decline or anything in between or over that, what's your plan? What's the definition of insanity, Larry?
It's doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, Tim.
So if that's true, if the last two times this has happened, it caused significant pain from some major ugly losses in the average investment portfolio. If what you're doing today is the same thing that you've been doing all along, is it reasonable to assume that the next market decline we go through that you're going to experience the same type of pain?
Yeah, that's
Right.
yes.
And so my question to you today, whether you're an employee or a plan participant, we call it, or you're an employer, what are you doing within your investment portfolio, within your retirement plan, within all aspects of your investment pie, if you will? What are you doing to manage the downside risk in your portfolio? And if the answer to that is, well, I'm really not sure, or often the answer for most people is, well, we're diversified. In other words, we don't put all of our eggs in one basket.
Or, Tim, what we hear a lot, and it's kind of sad, is, well, my financial advisor is my brother-in-law or this or that, and I don't dare touch it because I could offend somebody. By the way, folks, you're listening to Financial Planning. Your host, Jack Taboda, your IRA 401k rollover specialist. I am Larry Chappell, the co-host of the show. Jack Taboda is not here today. However, he very much is looking forward to meeting with you next week, Call in, get that appointment. You're going to get a live person, 630-777-7955. Our special guest today, you're listening to Tim Newell, Managing Director and Lead Portfolio Manager. Tim, as I was saying right before I had to get that in, a lot of people tune in here and there, and they need to know who's on the air today. But really, that's exactly it. It's insane. It's insane that, and it's not like when they're 75 or 80, they don't get a redo, do they?
I don't think so. I don't know how that. Well, there are some. I won't even go there. But there are some folks that believe that we get a redo, but not with your 401k plan, I suppose, or not with your retirement portfolio. I mean,
Exactly.
if you experience those major losses, and often it really doesn't matter whether you're 25 or 85,
Right.
Nobody wants to go through that.
Right.
It's not any more comfortable for somebody who's 25 to experience a 50% loss in their portfolio than it is for somebody that's 85. I suppose the difference is we've been sold that 25-year-old person can withstand those losses because they've got time to make it up. And although I'll give you that yes, they have time to make it up,
Right.
The reality is the amount of money that 25-year-old is going to need in order to be able to retire someday is just mind-boggling when you actually run the numbers on it. So I don't care what age you are. Our objective is to show you strategies, to teach you strategies, to make sure that you've got strategies employed within your portfolio to limit your downside, to put downside risk controls into your portfolio. Specifically, we're talking about it with your 401k plan. So if you have a 401k plan as a employee, or you're an employer and you manage a 401k plan on behalf of your employees that are trusting you to make good decisions and make good choices on their behalf as it refers to your 401k plan, I would encourage you to go to Kubota.com, click on 401k Active Watch, and take a look at what exactly is 401k Active Watch and how can it help you, whether you're an employee or an employer. So let's take a few minutes to unpack what 401k Active Watch really is from the perspective of an employee. And you have been saving for retirement using your 401k plan or your TSA plan or some form of retirement plan that's sponsored by your employer. So you're putting money into this plan week after week, month after month, and you're accruing this balance. And one of the challenges that you have is making a decision, where do you put your money within the plan, because you have all of these investment choices. You've got anywhere from a dozen to hundreds of mutual fund choices that are made available to you in the plan. And it's your responsibility to choose which funds you want to be in and when, and how long do you hold them, and when do you fold them, as the song says, right? So one of the challenges that we've heard for years is that the average person really has no idea exactly which funds to choose and when. Well, what 401k Active Watch does is that we come alongside of you and provide the advice on a regular basis as to which funds you should be in and what percentage that you should have in each one of those funds that we're recommending that you be in, and for how long you should be in them. We are going to provide that advice to you depending upon the plan that you chose, typically on a quarterly basis. So the beginning of each quarter, calendar quarter, we're going to give you a trade recommendation, or depending upon the plan that you chose of working with 401k Active Watch, actually make the trade for you. And when the markets are trending down or going negative, and the timing is right to move to the sideline, we're going to give you that recommendation as well. But just as importantly, we're going to give you the recommendation as to when you should move back in. Now, we're not doing that based upon some predictions or trying to forecast markets. We do that using rules-based models. So after you've chosen the appropriate model, whether you went online at 401k Active Watch and chose it yourself, or you worked with Jack to help you choose the right model to use, we would then give you the advice on a regular basis, which funds to be in and when. And each one of our rules-based models have downside risk controls built in to help you avoid those major market declines. Whether you're an employer or an employee, I know that's important to you.
Folks, you're listening to Financial Planning with your host, Jack Taboda, your IRA 401k rollover specialist. I'm Larry Chappell, the co-host for Financial Planning. Jack Taboda is not in studio today. However, he is looking forward to meeting with you. 630-777-7955. We'll be right back.
Said if you're gonna play the game, boy, you gotta learn to play it right. You got to know when to hold up, know when to fold up, know when to walk away, know when to run.
Folks, welcome back to Financial Planning with your host, Jack Taboda, your IRA 401k rollover specialist. Jack is not in the studio today. I am Larry Chappell, your co-host, and we have today Jack's good friend, Tim Newell, Managing Director and Lead Portfolio Manager of Harvest Investment Services. This is the second week we've had Tim on the show. So much to cover in the area of his expertise. Of course, he's got a lot of expertise, but today we're covering specifically the 401k, both for the employee and the employer, talking about rollovers, talking about what you should be doing with it. Tim, go ahead.
So we've been talking about this 401k Active Watch program as a way for folks to be able to do a better job of managing their 401k. Let me take a few minutes to say that there's really 4 different ways that somebody can use 401k Active Watch. The first way is where they sign up and they pick a model, and we give them a recommendation on a timely basis each and every quarter to let them know exactly the changes that they should be making within their 401k plan. And they go online and make those changes themselves. The second way is where they pick that model, but they've authorized us with a limited power of attorney to go in and make those changes in the model for them. The third way is through something called a brokerage window. Now, many of you have never even heard of that before, and you're wondering, what in the world does a brokerage window have to do with my 401k plan? Well, often, if you go in and you talk to your employer or your HR department, if you ask them, do we have a brokerage window option available within our 401k plan, and they dig through the paperwork, often they'll tell you, yes, we do have one available. And what that allows you to do is to move your plan balance into that brokerage window, which is really a brokerage account. And then we would then be set up on the account as the portfolio manager to come alongside of you and actually execute the trades based upon the model that you chose. So it becomes a managed account where we're actually managing it on your behalf based upon the criteria of the model that you chose. And we're using the exact what we call ETFs that are in that model, as opposed to trying to mirror those ETFs to mutual funds that you may have available within your plan. The fourth way is the many plans have an in-service withdrawal feature. So if you're a little bit older and you've got a 401k balance that you'd like to be able to move over to a self-directed IRA, we can help you to do that and put it under management through the 401k Active Watch program or some other strategy that makes the most sense for you, even though you're continuing to fund new deposits into your 401k plan because you're still working for your employer. So those are the 4 different ways that you as an employee can take advantage of 401k Active Watch and some of the strategies that we employ, some of the downside risk controls that we employ through active tactical management within our models. Today we have in the studio the Director of Retirement Plans with Harvest Investment Services, Mike McClelland. Mike McClelland comes to us with decades of experience as a consultant working with employers at helping them and do a better job of not only starting and constructing a 401k or some form of retirement plan, but helping them to make those investment and decision choices along the way. We're going to come back in a minute and we're going to talk about, I'm going to ask Mike to talk about, what are the responsibilities that you as an employer have to your employees as what we call a fiduciary over your plan. whether you're an employer with 2 people or you've got hundreds of people, you have a fiduciary responsibility, which Mike is going to share with you in a minute, really means that you're personally liable. Your personal assets are on the line if something goes wrong connected to that 401k plan. And it's something that you really need to sit up and take notice, because there's some risk involved if you make the wrong decisions. One of the things that we do, whether it be through 401k Active Watch or just taking over the entire plan as the portfolio manager, is help build downside risk controls through managed accounts into your plan, and we make them available to your plan participants, your employees, to do a better job of managing their investment portfolio. Now, other than the obvious that no one likes to experience losses in their portfolio, you might ask yourself as an employer, why should I be so concerned about having downside risk controls built in through these managed models? And the answer to that really lies in the fact that you as an employer, you as what we call a plan sponsor, are a fiduciary. In a few minutes after the break, we're going to have Mike McClelland, the Director of Retirement Plans here at Harvest, talk a little bit about the issues that an employer has and the concerns that he or she should have about being a fiduciary on the retirement plan that they are a sponsor of with their employees.
Folks, you're listening to Financial Planning with your host, Jack Taboda, your IRA 401k rollover specialist, 630-777-7955, Taboda.com, TEBODA.com. We'll be right back.
Know when to hold up, know when to fold up, know when to walk away, know when to run.
Welcome back to Financial Planning with your host, Jack Taboda, your IRA 401k rollover specialist. We're pressed for time, so we're going to get right back into this. I'm very excited because this is a topic we've needed to cover for a long time on employers and them offering the 401k to the employees. And I know that Tim Newell and Mike are professionals on this. Tim, go ahead.
Mike, first of all, thanks for joining us in the studio today. You're a veteran of this industry and working with folks, both employees and employers, with their retirement plans. You're an accredited investment fiduciary. You understand what it means to be a fiduciary. You have a professional designation as a fiduciary. And what I'd like you to do as a several-decade veteran of this industry, talk to the employers that might be listening today about what it means to be a fiduciary and what are the ramifications of that, and what are some of the ways that we might be able to help them through Taboda and Associates and Harvest to do a better job of managing their fiduciary risk.
Thank you, Tim. It's a pleasure to be on the show. For those of you that are business owners, let me start by saying that if you've established a plan, you are indeed a fiduciary. You are the named fiduciary. A lot of business owners come to us here at Harvest Investment Services or at Taboda and Associates and asked us, what is it that we are if we are a fiduciary? If you are a fiduciary for a qualified retirement plan, you must act solely, according to the DOL, must act solely in the best interest of your participants and their beneficiaries. You must also act for the exclusive purpose of providing benefits to workers participating in the plan and their beneficiaries, and determine that the expenses associated with the plan are reasonable. This is according to the Department of Labor. This is a very important topic today, and it might be the reason why many of you out there have called in and being concerned about being a fiduciary. Late last year, the Department of Labor, you wonder why the DOL's involved, but the DOL decided they needed to broaden the definition of a planned fiduciary under ERISA. And why this is important for plan sponsors to understand, get their arms around this new definition of a fiduciary, goes back to that liability we talked about. Mm-hmm. Tim, most of the plan sponsors out there have a general misconception that their service providers are really taking on this responsibility for them.
Yeah.
And that is far from the truth. First of all, to be a fiduciary and to accept a fiduciary role, you have to tell the plan sponsor, the name fiduciary, that you are a fiduciary and acting as a fiduciary. It has to be done on a contractual basis. It has to be in writing. It has to be clear to not just you, but to your participants that you are a fiduciary. One of the things we do at Harvest with Kubota and Associates is we will provide you with some real deliverables for free because we care about you. We want you to be in good hands. Just as Larry mentioned earlier about Jack and how he feels about his clients. That's the way we all feel about our clients here at Harvest Investment Services and in cooperation with Jack. We're going to serve you well as a plan fiduciary by helping you identify some of the areas at risk in your plan or with your service providers, with your investment advisor. We're going to take an overall snapshot of that. In fact, if you call our office, and you call Jack's office today at 630-777-7955, well, we'll provide you free, no cost, a list of very pertinent questions. The key 7 questions you should be asking some of your service providers as you review your 401k plan. And keep in mind, there's been this broadening definition of fiduciary. And I really appreciate Tim giving me this time to talk about that. If you have any other topics about qualified retirement plans, I would sure like the chance to share that with your audience today.
Thanks, Mike. So if you're an employer and you're out there listening and you're wondering what in the world is all this that Mike is talking about, I suppose I understand what a fiduciary is, but really what exactly are my risks? And I'm not even sure exactly what questions to ask. If you call Jack's office at 630-777-7955 and ask them to either email you or fax you the 7 most important questions that every plan sponsor should ask of their current advisor on their 401k plan, we promise we will get that to you right away. And as you're going through that, if you have any other questions connected to that, feel free to contact us through Jack's office, and we'd be happy to do anything we can to serve you to make sure that you've got a good understanding of what it means to deal with the fiduciary risk that you as an employer really have.
Folks, you're listening to Financial Planning with your host, Jack Kubota, your IRA 401k rollover specialist. And there you have it. Many of you are like, why are you always saying IRA and 401k rollover specialist? Because that's what Jack specializes in. Not only the 401ks for the employee and hey, are we going to do this in-service withdrawal? What are we going to do? We have the 401k watch. But yes, indeed, as Tim and Mike have shared here, we also help you employers with the management, the setting up, all the things that are involved with that 401k with your employers. 630-777-7955, Kubota.com, TEBODA.com. We'll be right back.
Know when to hold up, know when to fold up, know when to walk away, know when to run.
Welcome back to Financial Planning with your host, Jack Kubota, your IRA 401k rollover specialist. Now, for 2 weeks in a row here, this is our second week, we've had the pleasure of having Tim Newell, the Managing Director and Lead Portfolio Manager for Harvest Investment Services, in studio with us. Jack has been out. I do believe Jack will return next week. However, Jack is definitely wanting to meet with you to do that 3-step review. Let's talk a little bit about what we've done over these last 2 weeks with Tim Newell and the 401k watch, how it works. Keep in mind, you can go to Kubota.com, TEBODA.com. There's the tab right on the upper right-hand corner, says 401k watch. For those of you that are let's say you're 40, 45, 50, 55, you're not ready for that in-service withdrawal, but you really want to make some money on that 401k, or at least you want some professional guidance. That's what you're going to get with 401k Watch. Tim, thank you so much for joining us. Give us a little recap. I know it's a lot of information, but tell the listeners some of the things, the nuggets here that they really need to take home, like don't just set it and forget it and some of the other stuff.
Thanks, Larry, and once again, thanks for having Mike and I on the air with you today. We've enjoyed being here. Just in summary, if you've got a retirement plan or any portion of your investment portfolio that has any exposure at all to the stock market or the bond market or however it's invested, be sure that you have some strategy in mind that has built in downside risk controls into the portfolio. And folks, the concept of just using diversification, as important as that is, please know that we're saying that's not enough. There needs to be more to it than that. And so make sure that you've got downside risk controls built in, because the same two market corrections or crashes that we saw over the last 14 years, there's nothing saying that something like that might not be as deep or as long won't happen again. Eventually, we will have another downturn in the market, whether that be a 5% or a 50% downturn. The objective is to build downside risk controls into your portfolio so that you don't lose a huge segment of your portfolio due to the next downdraft in the market. That's what we do at Harvest through Teboda & Associates and working with you with your 401k plan through 401k Active Watch. And the middle word in there is active. In other words, we don't just idly sit by and watch it, and we're not suggesting that you idly sit by and watch your 401k or your retirement plan balance decline. We think it takes active participation, not only on your part to pick up the phone and call or to go to the website and click on 401k Active Watch, but let us actively help you do a better job of managing your 401k plan, not just on the upside, but more importantly, on the downside.
Folks, financial planning, Jack Teboda, your 401k IRA rollover specialist. So thankful to have Tim Newell in studio with us today, Mike in studio with us today. Get a second opinion, people. 630-777-7955. Talk to you next week.